Fala pessoal, começando agora mais um GainCast, onde a gente fala de bolsa de valores sem mimimi. Tudo bem, Roberto Indec?
Tudo bom, Andrezão?
Tudo já. E hoje especial, né? Olha aqui, na Expert, cara, que legal.
Olha, faz uns 4 meses que eu acho que eu não te via, né?
É.
Ainda bem.
Ainda bem.
Infelizmente nos encontramos hoje com distanciamento obrigatório, por favor.
Vamos lá, mais pra cá, 2 metros aqui.
Enfim, e hoje convidado especial.
Super especial, um dos maiores traders do mundo, Velez. A gente vai ter um papo bem legal, tenho certeza.
Ótimo.
Vamos lá?
Vamos lá, então.
Então, roda a vinheta aí que a gente já começa. Vamos lá, começar então num dia bonito, né, Indec?
Bonito.
Hoje a bolsa aí subindo um pouco mais e a gente já está ouvindo. Que prazer falar contigo, Velez. É um prazer.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be here. Good seeing you guys as well.
Legal, deixa eu te perguntar já. Você está falando da Colômbia, está em casa, como é que está passando esses dias, como é que tem sido por aí, como é que estão os familiares, enfim, como é que você tem vivido esses últimos meses?
Wow. Well, first of all, I spend a good part of the year in Colombia, but also in the United States. So I call both those countries my home. And I am currently in the epicenter of the pandemic, if you will, in the United States. I'm in the state of Florida, and Florida is having quite an issue right now. So, but we're holding up well. We're keeping our social distancing. We're doing all the right things, and everyone's safe. And thank God for that.
Perfeito, importante, né? Cada um fazendo a sua parte. Aqui no Brasil também a gente está vivendo ainda um período complexo, mas em breve passa, em breve a gente vai estar de volta aí, não sei se ao normal, né? Mas vivendo o que a gente tem falado bastante, um novo normal. Então ótimo, quer começar, Indec, fazer a primeira pergunta?
Vamos começar, Oliver, novamente obrigado por estar aqui com a gente. Eu queria perguntar para você, e é da forma como a gente grava o nosso podcast aqui, queria que você contasse um pouco da sua história, né? Você é um trader muito experiente, reconhecido mundialmente. A gente queria saber lá de trás, de onde você começou, de onde veio a paixão pelo mercado financeiro.
Well, it's quite a long story. I've been at this game called trading for actually 38 years. I placed my first trade ever in March of 1981. That's a long time ago. I moved to professional trading in December of 1986, and I've been trading professionally since that time. But let me go back to how I actually got started in the entire industry. And do you need me to pause, or can I just keep going?
Fique à vontade, fique à vontade, espaço é seu.
It's a very interesting story how I got involved in the markets. My father was a taxi driver, and he had this special client that he took every single day to Wall Street, 5 days a week. They got to know each other very well over the years, and this individual was a gold bug. That's an individual who really was very, very fascinated with gold and felt that all your savings should be invested in gold at the time. And he told my father, listen, gold is at $35 an ounce now, but I believe that it's not going to stay at $35 an ounce here. Over the next several years, I think the gold market's going to be deregulated, and that should explode the price. He encouraged my father to actually buy an ounce of gold every single week for his newborn son, me. To make a long story short, years later, all right, the gold price by the United States, gold shot from $35 an ounce to a high of $800 an ounce at that time. Now, here's what's interesting. That event changed my family's life. I mean, I went from living differently. I went from moving to a different state, changing schools, changing clothes, changing brand new cars, brand new homes. Our lives changed. And I was a little too young to understand what did that. But later in my teens, I learned that our life changed in a dramatic way for the better because of one financial act that my father did a long time ago. And it is that event, that realization that got me involved in the financial markets. My view was that if one investment, if one move like this can have that much of an impact on an entire family's life, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. And it is that event that got me involved in the markets all the way back in the early 70s, I should say.
Poxa vida, que história legal, muito bom, né? Quer dizer, é o trade da vida, né? Comprar um ouro e que mudou a vida da sua família. Eu me lembro, você fala de datas e tudo mais, eu me lembro pela primeira vez quando em 2002 eu cliquei lá em comprar uma ação e tive uma sensação, uma adrenalina, né, com aquilo, fazendo meu primeiro trade, que eu imagino que quem pula de paraquedas tem. E aí a hora que eu finalizei a primeira operação, que foi positiva, eu pensava, cara, eu não quero fazer outra coisa na minha vida a não ser isso. Eu vou arrumar um jeito de transformar a minha vida para ficar fazendo isso pro resto da vida. E hoje, quase 20 anos depois, né, posso te dizer que foi a melhor decisão que tomei também. Mas muito bom escutar a sua história e escutar um pouco de como ela começou, né? E eu queria também que você falasse, já que você começou há quase 40 anos, né? Um pouco desse momento que a gente acabou de viver, foi uma crise, né, de mercado caindo. Eu sei que a gente tem a possibilidade de trabalhar com a venda, mas isso não é tão lógico para novos participantes do mercado e, portanto, eles sofrem muito durante a crise, né? Você já passou por muitas, né? E que lições você tirou de cada uma dessas crises e principalmente dessa, né? Que lição que você tirou dessa crise que a gente teve nos mercados aí nos últimos meses?
Well, what I've come to realize is that every crisis that happens to financial markets are actually very, very similar. There's a repetitive cycle that almost plays out like it's a script. And what's fascinating to me is that lessons are learned from each crisis, but they're long forgotten by the strength of the market that comes after the crisis. And it's interesting to me that despite how many the markets had and how repetitive this cycle is, we keep continuing to create the same things that cause these relatively destructive cycles. A lot of people believe that this moment in time, what we're going through now, is very, very different from any other time, and I disagree with that. The components that have led to a tremendous amount of liquidity in the markets, the components that have led to interest rates around the world dropping to near zero, the components that have led to a mad rush for financial assets, all of those components are the same. And those components work together to cause market bubbles and market collapses. Now, collapses in the market will come. Well, I don't believe that we'll ever do away with collapses in the market. That is the nature of markets to have crashes. It is the nature of markets to have bull periods as well. What I think is important for people to know is, where are we in the overall markets cycle? And that is something that I teach traders to understand. It is not very difficult to understand whether you're at near the top of a bubble and there's limited upside and the market's due for a downside. And it's not very difficult to know when you're relatively close to a bottom. Excuse me. And so the market is going to repeat the same cycles over and over and over again. The mistake that many investors make is just not knowing where they are in that cycle. That cycle is broken up into 4 unique phases, one phase being the top, one phase being the bottom, and then you have obviously your up phase and your down phase. Understanding where you are in that bell-shaped curve type cycle is the key to playing the markets and not really getting hurt very badly during these pandemics or during these difficult times.
Perfeito.
Legal, eu queria entrar, André, e eu queria te perguntar, Oliver, o seguinte: você trabalha em vários mercados distintos, né? Quando eu digo vários, você nasceu, você cresceu num ambiente diferente daquele que você está hoje, e olhando para mercados, isso, se eles são diferentes ou se você olhando do ponto de vista gráfico, cada um tem suas particularidades, ou se no final das contas é tudo igual. E por que eu estou te perguntando isso? Porque a gente está vendo cada vez mais um momento de integração entre as bolsas, pessoas buscando diversificar seus investimentos de uma maneira internacional, enfim. Então eu queria saber de você se os mercados para você têm comportamentos diferentes ou são só os ativos?
Well, that's a very interesting question. No, I don't think that behavior of markets are different. I do think that what's different is the length of certain cycles. So the cycle is the same. The repetitive phases of the cycle are always the same. And this goes all the way back 500 years, okay? But what's changed is the length of a cycle. I'll give you an example. The average bull market throughout history, okay, has been about 4.5 years. The average bear market historically over about a year and a half. Now, what's happened now that we're stretching the bull part of the cycle. We've just come off of a bull run that's greater than 10 years long. This is historically outside of the norm, all right? And when you go that far outside of the norm, you're obviously setting yourself for something outside of the norm on the downside as well, all right? So the cycles of up and down will never go away. The length of those cycles are being extended largely through central banks throughout the world and their monetary policies.
Legal. E uma das coisas, Oliver, e já entrando em gráfico, que é o que a gente gosta e trata muito aqui, né, que a gente aprendeu com o tempo, é que você consegue performar bem se o preço sobe e da mesma forma você consegue performar bem quando o preço cai, né? Então, eu sei que um dos seus setups preferidos é o início da manhã, aonde você compra no gap de alta, vende no gap de baixa, então tanto faz para onde que vai ser esse gap. É bom que ele exista em boas ações com boa liquidez, né? Então, eu queria que você falasse um pouco, porque a gente entende que, pelo menos eu entendo, que o trader é de fato um trader quando ele tem uma estratégia que ele construiu com a ajuda dos seus tutores, você, por exemplo, um tutor de muita gente, né? E ele passa a acreditar naquilo e aquilo passa a ser uma verdade, ele não está ali mais para ganhar dinheiro ou para acertar o trade, ele está ali para seguir a estratégia dele, né? Eu queria que você falasse um pouco da sua estratégia. Eu, até os últimos vídeos que eu vi seu, você falava muito das médias de 20 e 200, eu também gosto de 2 médias no gráfico, só isso, eu gosto de um gráfico mais limpo. Eu vi você falando do gráfico de 2 minutos, que era o teu preferido para esse início da manhã, então eu queria saber se mudou alguma coisa, se está aí. E aí eu vi que você trouxe alguns slides, se você quiser mostrar esses slides, fique à vontade.
Sure. Let's take the first slide. Sure. Here's something interesting that I've done. I did a study on all of the losing trades of my traders, a 6-month study. I took every single losing trade. And something really interesting was revealed in that study, that 85% of those losses, 85% of all losses were the result of trading against the 20 period simple moving average. So what you see here is, it looks like, what is that? A chart of Apple. It's like a monthly chart of Apple. Okay. And the time frame doesn't matter. What I have superimposed on this chart is a simple 20 period moving average. Now, if you look carefully, you can see that for years, the 20 period moving average in Apple has been rising. Now, 85% of all losses are the result of trading in the opposite direction of the 20 period simple moving average. And this is not just applicable in a monthly time frame. This is applicable in any time frame. And so if market participants just knew a few basic technical themes or concepts, I should say, like one, use the 20 period moving average, no matter what chart you're looking at. Also, note the trend of the 20 period moving average. Is the 20 period moving average rising? Is the 20 period moving average declining? If you're going to take a trade, you want to take a trade in the direction of the 20 period moving average. And this is akin to going with the flow, going with the power, going with the trend. So 85% of all losses are basically going against the trend, and this simple 20 period moving average will help you. Now, there's another thing. Another set of mistakes or errors or losing trades were the result of getting into an item not near the 20 period moving average. So even if the trader traded in the direction of the 20 period moving average properly, they could still enter the market at the wrong time. So they could play the right trend, but enter at the wrong time. Well, the best times to enter are when your item is near the 20 period moving average, not away from the 20 period moving average. Now, if you look at this chart we have here, if you go to the very far left, this is as of yesterday. This is the chart as of yesterday. All right. This is the Apple monthly chart as of yesterday. Now, notice how far the last green bar is from the 20 period moving average. Now, I want you to understand, notice in this chart, the last bar of the green, how far it is from the 20 period moving average. Now, that is not an appropriate time to start buying or accumulating this stock, Apple. Why? Because it's not near the 20. It's far away from the 20. Now, here's the thing that's really interesting. Stocks in all financial items, they can get far away. They can't stay far away. I was doing a talk yesterday on this very item. This is called my space concept. You need to know where your stock is in relationship to the 20 period moving average. And if it's away, how much space is it away? And if there's a lot of space between the stock and the 20, your stock is very, very vulnerable. It has, number one, limited upside, and number two, a pullback to the 20 period moving average is almost imminent. And if you go back over the years, every time Apple has risen away from the 20 period moving average, it's almost as if the 20 has pulled it back in. Every time it gets way too far away from the 20 pulls it back in. And the last decline, if you look carefully, the very last 2-bar giant move to the downside on this chart, that's the coronavirus collapse. As you can see, right before the collapse, Apple was extended far away from its 20. Okay. The collapse brought it back to the 20. Now, this most subsequent rally off the low of the coronavirus crash has brought Apple back to an even larger extended position. And so this would indicate technically that your stock has limited upside. Not that it can't go up a little bit more, that's fine, but it's limited upside, and the probabilities are far greater that the 20 period moving average pulls it back in. So these are some of the basic but very powerful concepts that I ensure that my traders understand. It keeps them on the right side of the market, and it keeps them away from making the most common mistakes that investors and traders make, entering at the wrong time when there's limited upside available.
Oliver, eu espero que os meus traders também estejam vendo aqui essa palestra. Todos estão, pode ter certeza, né? Porque eu falo isso para eles todos os dias, né?
I hope so
Não,
too.
não comprem longe das médias, né? Eu comparo isso a um elástico, né? A média está aqui, você pega um elástico e estica. Quanto mais esticada tiver essa média, mais corre o risco de alguém soltar esse elástico e o preço voltar. E aí vai ficar uma foto sua lá no topo, carimbado, né? Comprei aqui. E quando você não precisa comprar, né? Uma das coisas que a gente precisa aprender com o tempo é que tem hora de comprar, tem hora de vender e tem hora de ficar de fora, né? Por exemplo, uma boa hora de ficar de fora é quando o preço já foi, quando a operação já aconteceu, né? Como a gente vê ali nesse gráfico da Apple. É só um comentário que eu queria fazer, se você quiser continuar, fica à vontade.
No, fantastic, fantastic. Let's take a look at another chart. Let's go to the next one. Okay, this by contrast is a very short-term time frame. We're looking at a 2-minute chart of Microsoft. Now, a micro trader or a day trader can still use the same concept, right? You have every bar on this chart of Microsoft represents 2 minutes of trading. You have a 20-period simple moving average. That's the blue line that you see. Now, that blue line is rising for the most part, which means that you want to trade in the direction of the 20-period moving average. You should not be trying to be fancy and pick a top and try to short against or play against that 20-period moving average. So we can go back to that. Again, with the same concepts here, when are you interested in getting into Microsoft? Well, when it's a little closer to the 20-period moving average. When would you not want to get into or buy Microsoft in this 2-minute chart? When Microsoft has moved away from the 20-period moving average. Now, if the best time to get into a stock with a rising 20-period moving average like this chart, if the best time to get in is near the 20-period moving average, then the best time to get out on a short-term trade is once the stock moves away from the 20-period moving average. And this cycle is repetitive all day long. Get in near the rising 20-period moving average when a green bar takes out a red bar. Once the stock moves away from the 20-period moving average, you can start taking your profits. Repeat, repeat, repeat. And it is this simple color game. It's what I call the color game. When a green bar takes out the high of a red bar near the rising 20-period moving average, go. It's the color game. It's when your green color overpowers a red bar near the rising 20. That's your entry signal. Your exit signal is a little more vague, but once you move away from that 20-period moving average, you have a right to take profits off. And this is the repetitive cycle that not only do we play this long-term, like we just looked at the long-term chart of Apple, but we also do this on an intraday basis for short-term trading profits.
Oliver, deixa eu te perguntar, aqui no nosso podcast a gente conversa com uma série de traders e todos eles, na sua grande maioria, têm estratégias diferentes, filosofias de trabalho diferentes, o que eu acho muito positivo, que é como o André, aqui ao meu lado, sempre costuma falar, o importante é ganhar dinheiro independente da sua estratégia ou da forma como você opera. O importante é manter a disciplina e etc. Eu queria saber de você estava mostrando para a gente um gráfico da Apple e depois a gente veio um gráfico também da Microsoft. Você costuma operar apenas alguns ativos ou você acredita que a sua estratégia acaba servindo para todos os ativos, em geral aqueles que têm mais liquidez ou até menos liquidez? Se puder comentar isso para a gente, por favor.
I believe, that's a very good question, by the way. I believe that my strategies are universal across all financial markets and also all time frames. Why is that? I'll answer. Very, 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 very interesting. Markets are moved by two dominant emotions. There's really three, but the two dominant emotions we know are fear and greed. So a greed-oriented market's going to rise, and a fear-based market will cause people to pull their money out, and therefore prices fall. Now, this fear to greed and greed back to fear cycle, that is the cycle that moves all financial markets. There's no market that is not operated or moved by those two dominant emotions. The strategies that I teach, well, those dominant emotions are going to produce the same patterns no matter what the market is. And so my strategies are based on these repetitive cycles that are created by fear and greed. And trading or investing in a nutshell comes down to one simple thing. It's when does greed stop and hand the control over to fear? You see, both greed and fear are like runners, right? So when greed is running its race to the upside, when does greed get tired as a runner, as a racer, and hand the baton to fear? And when does fear grab the baton and start running its race? When you can catch the moment or identify the moment in any market, when greed passes the baton to fear, that pass where greed no longer runs and fear begins its new life or its new race, that moment looks practically the same every single time. Now, conversely, the other moment, fear is running its race to the downside, but it won't be able to run a race forever. Fear runs out of breath, if you will, becomes tired, and then hands his baton back to fear. There's a moment where both of them have the baton, where fear has passed the baton, greed has grabbed the baton. That moment of transfer in the markets, no matter what market it is, looks practically the same every single time. And so when you learn what are the signs of the baton pass, what are the signs of transfer from fear to greed and back to from greed to fear, when you understand what those signs look like, you're really starting to get ahead of the game. And so all of my tactics and techniques are based on those moments, on those transfer of power moments. And therefore, they're applicable across all markets and all time frames.
Que legal, muito bom. Ganância e medo, né? Todos os mercados, você tem razão, Oliver, são movidos por isso, né? Oliver, uma coisa que eu queria te perguntar é sobre, eu não sei se você sabe, mas a sua estratégia mais famosa aqui no Brasil, assim, vários traders discutem isso, tem até fórum que fala dessa estratégia, é a estratégia de operar abertura de mercado, né? Observando os gaps, né, que são a mudança de preço que acontece de um dia para o outro, e desses ativos que você mostrou aí. Se você tiver algum exemplo que você puder falar e mostrar, eu tenho certeza que todo mundo vai adorar.
Well, we can go back to that Microsoft chart. I think that's the only intraday chart that I have available right now. Let's go back to that Microsoft chart. I think it was the second chart.
Eu achei realmente que aquela abertura lá da Microsoft daria um belo trade, assim, te conhecendo aqui, eu acho que é o gráfico de 2 minutos, né?
Yes. It was a 2-minute chart, yes. I think it's the next one. Keep going, keep going.
Mais um. Isso.
There we go. So yes, I've taught quite a number of traders, I believe over 3,000 traders throughout Brazil, my opening trading tactics over the last several years. And it has become popular, not just in Brazil, but actually United States, Latin America, all over. And there are some simple concepts that I rely on to trade a stock off the open. First of all, let's define what the open is. I consider the open anywhere between the first 20 to 30 minutes of every single trading day. Now, unlike in the past, most markets are more prevalent to gap at the open. So if you look at Microsoft here, that horizontal line on the left-hand side of the chart marks the beginning of a brand new day. And so that green bar that is elevated above the prior piece of data to the left, that's a gap to the upside. So Microsoft is starting its life today above yesterday's closing price. Now, when it comes to trading the open, we use two key moving averages, the 20-period moving average, which we've been speaking about, and we also use the 200-period moving average. Now, these two moving averages operating in a buddy type system like brothers and sisters is very, very important because we need to use them to determine what kind of state the market is starting its day off of. So let's talk about the state first, because we have to determine the state. If we go to the far left-hand side of the chart, you will see that all three items are relatively close together. So you see on the far left-hand side of the chart, you will see the price data, the 20-period moving average, the 200. They're kind of together, really tight and narrow together. That's called a narrow state. All right. Now, if you go to the far end of to the far right-hand side of the chart, you'll see that the 20 and the 200 have separated wide apart. That's a wide state. Now, here's why that's important. Your best trades off the open are going to come out of a narrow state, not a wide state. Let me repeat that. If your best trades off the open are going to come from a narrow state. All right. So Microsoft is starting its life above a narrow state, which increases the odds that there's going to be flow to the upside because of the narrow state. Now, if this were a wide state, if all three of the items were wide yesterday, and then Microsoft starts its life above a wide state, the odds are overwhelming that the first move is down, not up. So starting the life from a wide state, we typically play the open in the opposite direction. Starting the life from a narrow state, we play in the same direction as the gap. So how we'd get into this Microsoft play is we'd let the first 2 minutes of the day trade. So we'd let that first 2-minute bar complete itself. And if any subsequent bar trades above the high of that first bar, boom, we get in. So our entry would be bar number 2. That's the bar that traded above the high of bar number 1. Our protective stop would be under the first bar. All right, right? Relatively tight, narrow stop. And any multiple bar move that takes the stock away from the 20-period moving average further is your profit-taking opportunity. So knowing the state first is so extraordinarily important, and you need these two moving averages to do it, the 20 and the 200.
Olha, eu tinha razão, né? Eu vi o gráfico e falei, acho que aquele trade ali de abertura o Oliver faria. Muito bom. Eu acho que tem um assunto, Oliver, que eu gostaria de tratar aqui, que quando o meu trader ele fala para mim aonde comprar, né, eu consigo pegar um gráfico como exemplo e dizer, olha, eu compraria aqui a minha estratégia, diz isso e tal. Mas quando o cara fala para mim que tem algum problema emocional, né? Poxa, eu sou muito ansioso, eu saio muito cedo das operações, eu tiro o meu stop, não stop a operação. é uma coisa que eu consigo ajudá-lo também, contando a minha história, falando o que eu fiz errado, os erros que eu cometi, como isso foi ruim, o que você pode não fazer. Mas eu acredito que o cara vence essa, não é objetivo, mas ele vence essa barreira emocional de fazer a coisa certa a partir do momento que ele passa a acreditar na estratégia dele. Porque aí ele some toda a ansiedade, o medo e tudo, e ele se concentra em seguir a estratégia. Eu vi um vídeo seu e sei que você fala de uma forma muito parecida. Eu queria que você falasse sobre isso, porque é uma das coisas que mais prejudica o trader. Porque, no fundo, entender um gráfico de 2 eixos com 2 médias móveis não é uma coisa complexa. Pelo contrário, é uma coisa simples, né? Mas repetir processos no dia a dia sem sentimentos é uma coisa que depende de um tempo, né? E eu queria que você falasse sobre isso, dessa questão emocional.
Eu só quero complementar, antes de passar a bola, eu queria complementar porque semana passada eu recebi 2 mensagens com o mesmo teor, das pessoas falando que estavam com medo desse momento do mercado ter subido muito forte ao longo das últimas semanas. E a minha resposta é: você não tem que ter medo do mercado, você tem que ter medo do desconhecido, a não ser que você siga com disciplina, com estratégia, enfim. Então eu queria que você respondesse essas perguntas, por favor.
Yeah. Yes. Well, excuse me. First of all, I believe that the vast majority of people, believe it or not, believe that the market is complex. And it is this idea of its complexity that actually causes a lot of the fear. It was the foundation for a lot of the fear. But in reality, the market is very primitive. All markets are very, very basic. They have primarily 3 movements: up, down, and sideways. The human body is complex with billions of processes going on, firing off every single second. If we had to figure that out, it's been zillions of years and we're still baffled by the complexity of the human body. But the market as a body is very, very basic. It's very similar. Again, very simple. Again, up, down, sideways. That's it. Now, why does it feel more complex, which is the basis of the fear? It feels more complex because we bring complexity to the game. The game doesn't have complexity. We bring the complexity. We bring our lack of discipline to the game. We bring our lack of a trading plan. We bring our lack of a very well-defined method. We bring our inability to follow our own rules. And it is all of these things that we add to the market play that gives it its complexity. All right. Fear and nervousness in trading is really the fear of what? It's not really the fear of a loss as much as it's the fear that the trader doesn't trust himself. So the trader doesn't trust himself to do the right thing. And that is where the fear comes in. As an example, if my trading plan is something simple like this: when I buy, I don't lose more than $50 on any given trade, ever. That's rule number 1. When I go up $50, I move my $50 loss stop to break even. That's step number 2 in the plan, right? When I reach $100, I now move my stop to protect $50. That's step number 3. That's a very simple, rudimentary, but actually workable trading method. Now, let's say a trader has that method. What is there to fear? You have already defined that I won't lose more than $50. That's not the fear. If one followed that plan, every loss would be $50. And just by osmosis, just by numerical truth, you're going to get some 100s. You're going to get some $50 wins. You're going to get some $50 losses. You're going to get some break evens. But if you play in the direction of the 20-period moving average with a basic system like that, it is going to work. period. But where would the fear in a method like that come from? The fear is not the possibility of a $50 loss. The fear is the fear is that the trader doesn't trust himself to follow that very basic but powerful trading plan. And so how does a trader conquer that? Some traders will never be able to conquer that. You know, I mean, let's face it, for some people, trading is not for them. But you can only get rid of this fear by becoming more and more disciplined with your plan. And this discipline with your plan, you begin to gain so much faith and confidence in the plan that you no longer feel that you are the trader. When that transfer happens, fear goes away. You're not supposed to be the trader. Your plan is the trader. Your method is the trader. This plan that I just laid out, enter $50 stop. Once you get a $50 gain, move your stop to break even. Once you get a $100 gain, move your stop to protect $50, and do that every $50, right? That's the trader. You're not supposed to get involved. You're not supposed to be making decisions in the middle of the trade. You're not supposed to be doing anything but actually watching your trading plan do its thing. And when you get yourself to the place where you realize it is my method that trades, not me. It is my plan that trades, not me. When you can get yourself to that, you drop all fear. Even when trades don't work, you see it as the plan not working that time, not me failing. All right. So the beginning trader has to work toward becoming disciplined with a plan. And that discipline will begin to change the trader over into basically being a follower of a plan and not a trader. Our decisions are our enemy. Our thoughts in trading, these are our enemies. You're not supposed to be thinking, and you're not supposed to be making decisions. In that plan that I just laid out, there's no room for thinking, no room for changing, no room for wondering, no room for analyzing. You just follow the steps the same way every single trade, no matter what. And that's disciplined trading. The closer you can become to a robot, a systematic robot trader, doesn't think, doesn't decide. My plan does all of that for me. And then fear stops becoming an issue. Nervousness stops becoming an issue. You start to trade more like an algorithm or more like a machine than a human being. And that transition does take time, though. It's not something that can come overnight.
Ótimo, porque uma das coisas que às vezes as pessoas chegam para falar comigo é eu quero entrar no mercado de ações para ganhar dinheiro de forma rápida e fácil. Eu falo, cara, isso não é assim, né? Não se ganha dinheiro de forma rápida e fácil com nada no mundo, com nenhuma profissão. Você pode comprar o bilhete de loteria e ele está premiado, mas aí você deu sorte, né? Se não for assim, as coisas levam um tempo. Existe um processo pelo qual você vai ter que passar para que, ao final desse processo, você possa se concentrar em ganhar dinheiro. Só que ao final desse processo, você nem vai se concentrar em ganhar dinheiro. Você vai se concentrar em seguir o seu plano, como você falou. Porque é tão legal ver o todo e não a parte, não é importante aquela operação exatamente. É importante você repetir aquele processo e otimizar esse processo para que ao final de 1000 operações você ganhe dinheiro, né? Então é muito bom escutar isso, porque é uma das coisas que tem acontecido muito, é o pessoal por conta da pandemia, precisa de arrumar uma nova fonte de renda e chega no mercado achando que em um mês vão, enfim, tá ganhando milhões e infelizmente não é assim, isso depende de um processo. Oliver, eu queria explorar mais uma coisa sobre as suas estratégias. Eu acho que nisso a gente também é parecido, quer dizer, eu gosto de duas médias móveis, eu gosto de abertura de mercado, e eu tenho meus horários preferidos para ficar na frente do monitor, que é o começo da manhã e o final da tarde, mais o início da manhã do que no final da tarde. O miolo do dia, como eu trabalho com médias móveis, no miolo do dia, geralmente, o preço fica acima e abaixo, ou seja, perde tendência, aquela condição quando ele está lateral, né? Eu queria saber das suas preferências. Eu sei que você gosta mais da parte da manhã, né?
Yes, excuse me. Yes, I actually do prefer the morning. The best times, and I'm pretty sure this is universal across all markets, but I'm speaking specifically about the U.S. markets. But I believe this might apply to your market as well and other markets throughout the world. But I call them the bookends. The beginning of the day, let's say the first 90 minutes to 2 hours of the day, and the last 90 minutes to 2 hours of the market day. Those are the ends. Those are the bookends. Those typically make the best trading periods. In the middle is where a lot of traders get into a lot of trouble. It is the middle. I call it the black hole or the midday doldrum period. This is the period of the day in most markets where follow through is less. So there's a lack of follow through, not all the time, but most of the time, a lack of follow through. In addition to that, there's a higher level of unreliability. So whatever plan or tactics that you use will tend to be more reliable in the first part of the day and the last part of the day. And there's a very basic reason for this. The reason is simple, that the middle of the day, the market loses a good portion of its participation, its participants. And think about this. The market doesn't have a life of its own. This is an erroneous idea that the market has a life. It doesn't have a life. If no one showed up to the market wouldn't go anywhere, up or down. It needs participation from the people. So from people and machines or whatever, but it doesn't have a life apart from the participants themselves. So the market's life is nothing more than the collective actions of the participants. Now, in the beginning of the day, all of the participants are active. In the middle of the day, you start to lose participation. So think of the market's life is the participation, but the market in the middle of the day loses some of its participation. It loses some of its blood. It's weaker. It doesn't have the same oomph, the same power, because the participation's lower. Why is it lower? Lunch, break. And at the end of the day, most of the participation comes back. Not all of it, but most. So the end of the day becomes similar to the beginning of the day because participation is higher. And so knowing the best times in any market is also very key to making sure that you're playing in the most opportune, high odds environments.
Legal, legal. Será que temos mais uma pergunta aqui?
Temos mais 5 minutos, eu quero fazer mais uma pergunta
então
e você também faz mais uma pergunta, porque a minha é muito rápida, André Moraes. A minha, na verdade, vai durar 10 segundos a resposta dele. Oliver, objetivamente, parte técnica e parte psicológica, percentualmente, enquanto você separa cada um desses termos para o trader, e aí acho que a gente pode falar, né, André, o trader não precisa nem ser do trader iniciante, até para um trader já um pouco mais profissional, que é aquele que tem um pouco mais de desenvoltura nesse mercado.
We didn't quite understand the question. The percentage of what?
Quantos por cento para você... Quantos por cento para você é a parte técnica e quantos por cento é a parte psicológica no momento do trade?
Oh, good, good, good. That's an excellent question, by the way. Um, I would say that psychology is by far the greatest component to the trading game. The technical component, the plan, the strategies, the tactics, the money management, the trade management once you're in the trade, the profit taking guidelines that you use, all of that is about 15%. Because if you can have all the right tools, but if you don't have the right, if you don't have the right psychology, then the tools will not matter for you. And you can put it like this: as a the tools of a carpenter, that's not the carpenter's secret. If there's an amazing carpenter, the secret's not in his tools as much as it is in the carpenter's talent. That talent flows through the tools, right? So give those same carpentry tools to someone who's not a carpenter, and they will probably put themselves in the hospital, right? So same thing in the market. You can have the best strategy, you can have the best tactics, the best techniques, you can even have mine. But if you're not psychologically sound and emotionally sound as an individual trader, then what will flow through those tactics, techniques, even mine, will be something not good. And so the technicals are about 15%. The rest is all psychology.
Legal, eu tenho um slide de PowerPoint enorme que fala assim, a parte emocional é mais importante que a análise técnica, né? Todo mundo acha que dominando os gráficos vai conseguir ganhar. Oliver, infelizmente eu não tenho nem tempo para pergunta, mas olha só, surge a oportunidade da gente de repente combinar a hora que acabar esse momento dessa pandemia, da gente vir aqui, de te trazer aqui para o Brasil para a gente fazer um treinamento.
Por que não? Nós iremos lá até Miami ou até a Colômbia.
Pode ser.
I would love to.
Pode ser. E aí, se você vier ao Brasil, traz os tacos de golfe, que aqui a gente arruma um bom campo aqui para a gente se divertir um pouco também entre os treinamentos, tá certo? Mas eu queria dizer que foi um enorme prazer falar contigo. Você é uma das pessoas que inspiram traders, me inspirou milhares de traders aqui no Brasil. Parabéns pelo trabalho. Espero aí que em breve a gente possa, quem sabe, logo após essa pandemia, organizar alguma coisa para você voltar ao Brasil, acho que já esteve aqui algumas vezes, né? Para a gente treinar mais traders, tá? Indec.
E Oliver, sempre antes da gente terminar, a gente pede para o nosso convidado, né, André?
Isso.
Para trazer uma música.
Que te inspira.
Que te inspira no momento do trader, ou que você costuma até, algumas vezes, gostar de escutar nas suas aulas quando você passa para os seus alunos. E é muito legal a gente terminar com um bom momento desse em alto astral e naquilo que a gente confia com uma música boa, né?
You play a song?
Yeah.
Yes. Não. Só dizer qual é a música que te inspira, né? O que você, qual música que você gosta de ouvir naquele dia que você termina e deu tudo certo, e aí você tá lá relaxado depois do pregão, o que você gosta de ouvir?
There's a song that has sort of become our theme song, and this has been the case for I'm gonna go back 25 years. And it's a song called Rise. It's a classic today. It's called Rise. And every time I play this for my traders, we get so pumped up and ready to go. And it's a song that I usually start a lot of my training sessions with to get the traders pumped up as well. But it's called Rise.
E quem é o músico? Antes da gente só passar para suas redes sociais também, Oliver, só fala pra gente quem que é o músico que canta essa música. Quem é o músico?
Who plays? Let me just quickly tell you. I'm not sure why I'm going blank here, but rise.
Não, sem problema.
Sem problema, Oliver. A produção depois acha, na hora que sair o podcast, a gente vai estar com essa música.
Sem problema.
Herb Alpert.
Ótimo, perfeito. Oliver, mais uma vez, muito obrigado. Foi um enorme prazer falar contigo e espero vê-lo em breve aqui no Brasil.
Exato. Eu queria só, antes da gente encerrar, produção, se vocês puderem colocar na tela as redes sociais do Oliver Velez, para as pessoas que querem segui-lo e encontrar um pouco mais o trabalho dele também, eu vou agradecer nessa tela aqui que ele está mostrando aqui para a gente na produção. Oliver, muito obrigado novamente, muitas graças, thank you very much. Em breve estaremos juntos.
Thank you very much for having me.
E agora a gente vai para onde?
See you soon.
Obrigado.
Legal. Isso. Como é que a pessoa faz?